2023 is nearing its end, and 2024 is just around the corner. Time flies, and it is so still motionless. It's an enigma and a pain in the ass. But before we can get into the new year, we have a little business to attend to. That's right. We have our best games I did/didn't play of 2023. These are the games I played and absolutely adored. And I have to talk about them because they are absolutely wonderful. And some of the games I didn't play, but I really, really wanted to, of this past year. We do it every year, you know the shtick by now, and this year's list is a little weird, honestly. The didn't play and the did play lists are very out of sync. 3 and... what do we got? We got 3 and 6. That's it. Got 3 names on one, 6 names on the other. It's out of sync, but for good reason, and we'll get into those as we do. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the tale of some very fun games that you may or may not have heard, because by the end of this video, definitely going to want to pick some stuff up. The Steam sale might not be over by the time this video goes out. Ooh! Last minute video recordings. Yay! So yes, let's get into it. As always, we start off with the didn't playlist. These are the games that either came out this year and I didn't get a chance to play them, or they're coming out next year or the year after that, or in some cases the year after that, and we're just really anticipating the games that are coming down the line. And this year, it's a very, very short list. 3, in fact. Well, technically 4, but the 4th one was kinda not there, and I only kind of figured it out like a couple days ago, and I didn't realize. It's complicated. Don't worry about it. I'll maybe put it in my honorable mentions. Either way, we have 3 games that I really, really want to play, but didn't get around to it. So, let's get into that list. On the 3rd spot this year of the Didn't Play list, we have Remnant 2, the sequel that no one saw coming, but we're really excited to have. See, I love Remnant. It was a very unexpected game for me to enjoy, and I definitely have put it on a previous best games of the list, either last year or the year before. I think it was the year before this year, in 2021. I did foggy at best I can remember. But I never thought that people liked it. It didn't get a lot of press. Advertisement wasn't exactly kind to it, especially when it labeled it as a Souls-like with guns, when it's really a kind of more looter-shooter Diablo-esque kind of game with some Souls-like elements. It peeves me whenever someone calls it other than that. But Remnant 2 came out, and apparently people loved it. I mean, really loved it, which is excellent. I am so excited to play a little bit more refined gun shooting with a whole bunch of different weird and wacky guns. We have different bosses. We have different lore and enemies to fight. I really am looking forward to playing the game. I didn't play it this year because I think I had like another game. I think it was a toss between 2 games. Between that, I think it was Baldur's Gate 3. It came out roughly around at the time of something other really, really big. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but I had to make a choice, and I didn't choose it. But I am still very much looking forward to playing that game, which is why Remnant 2 gets the number 3 spot of this year's list. Speaking of didn't expect much, but I'm actually really excited to play, we have the 2nd spot on this year's list, Lords of the Fallen. This was the sequel/soft reboot of the Lords of the Fallen series. I say series, it was only 1 game, and it came out with moderate enjoyment. It was, granted, the original was something I kind of wanted to play because, I love my Souls-likes, and sometimes they have rough patches, and this one was one of the first to spin off from Dark Souls when it became really, really popular. But I've heard middling reviews, and it was a back burner kind of game, nothing really interesting in that, so we'll toss it on the side. But the remake, now you've got my attention. I'll get to the Lies of P thing in a sec, but Lords of the Fallen, from what I saw, looked like a pretty good dark fantasy Souls-like. Okay, you have my attention. But then they showed saw people play it, and they had the combat, which was actually kind of cool, a little bit different, a little bit more chunky, but also some pretty decent looking stuff. But then they did the lantern, and they changed dimensions or visions of worlds, and that really got my attention. I'm always the sucker for a really weird game mechanic in a game system type that I already really enjoy. And to have some kind of parallel universe world of souls and death on top of an already kind of soulsy death world, you got my attention immediately. Now, what people will probably be asking is, why this over Lies of P? Because it also is a really well implemented, probably, really much more beloved now, Souls-like, that does its own thing with really good mechanics and a really good story and a really cool world. To be honest, it doesn't grab me. I respect the hell out of Lies of P. Absolutely. They have done amazing work, and honestly, if I get a chance to play it someday, I'll definitely jump in and try it out. But I am not a steampunk fan. Okay, well, I am a steampunk fan, but I don't like industrial steampunk settings, if that makes sense. The reason I play a Souls-like is because I like the world, the lore, the exploration. I don't care about hard bosses. It's challenging, but fun, but I like the world. And Lies of P's world didn't grab me. Lords of the Fallen, however, grabbed me with both hands, shook me, and said, "Look at this other dimension!" And that's why it's the second spot on this list. I really want to play it. I'll probably check it out next year. It'll probably go for a little bit cheaper, or if I just have a really big hankering for a Souls-like game. Although I do believe, I think next year, I don't know for sure, but I think the Elden Ring DLC is coming out next year, so we'll see. But for now, that's why Elden Ring. I mean, it's always going to have my attention, but that's why Lords of the Fallen gets the number 2 spot on my didn't play list. So the number 1 spot this year was a bit tumultuous. Ooh, big word. I didn't actually think, or at least feel, because this is a more feel-based, emotion-based list, that it was going to make the list at all, because I don't know, I think it was kind of a big gap in advertisement, or I didn't know much about it. For reasons obvious, I don't pay attention to a lot of Remedyverse advertisement, because I don't want to be spoiled on the story and the experience. You can guess what the game is now. But because of that, I was kind of very away from the advertisement of Alan Wake 2. And it wasn't really, I wasn't invested until October rolled around and I played American Nightmare. And oh boy, did I have a blast with that. I adored Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I had heard so many mixed things about it. And it's the sequel Xbox Live Arcade game that came out that wasn't that great, but also was kind of okay. And I'll be honest, I bought it in a pack back when I first played Alan Wake. I've had it in my Steam library for years and was like, I'll get around to it eventually. But it never, the day never came because it's a so-so game, right? Lo and behold, Alan Wake 2's coming out this year. I thought, okay, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity. Let's play American Nightmare. And oh my god, I enjoyed the hell out of that game. Alright? It's not Alan Wake. It is much more floaty combat. It is much more... You can tell that it was put together not cheaply, but quickly, I guess. But the thing that stuck out the most and makes it a really, really fun game is the acting of Alan Wake. Mr. Scratch is amazing. The amount of scenery that was chewed throughout any moment of that game is amazing, and you have to play that game if you are an Alan Wake fan. It is so good, and it hit that beautiful little spot in my black shriveled heart with B-movies and so good it's bad kind of acting and stuff. The dedication in those performances in that game is so worth the price of admission. And the game's pretty fun too. I thought it had a pretty clever setup, good pacing despite being, well, a time loop game. Reusing assets, kind of smart. It was a really good put together on the budget kind of game, and I can really appreciate it with that. So that's what kicked off my, oh god, I'm actually really excited for Alan Wake 2. The fact that that was so enjoyable was like, oh, I kind of want to play Alan Wake 2 now. Ooh. And then, when it came out, because obviously I'm not going to pick it up on Epic. Not because I don't want to, but because I like my own organized things. Don't worry about it. It's OCD, and it's just my own brain telling me, don't put money in other things, keep it in one thing. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, when Alan Wake 2 came out, and everyone just absolutely gushed over it, and how similar yet different it was from the original, and how much the Remedy verse was crammed into it. And apparently there's a musical number. There's a fucking musical number in the game. What? I know how crazy Control got. And if Alan Wake 2 even had a fraction of that, I was already on board. But apparently there's not a fraction. There is a whole satellite coming down, hitting an oil tower, and exploding amount of content. And that's a reference to a reference. Alan Wake 2 immediately took the #1 spot this year. Out of such a short amount of time, just a couple months, it immediately took the #1 spot. No questions asked. I am keeping my distance. I have not watched anything. I'm doing my best to keep spoilers at a barest of minimum. I want to play that game so badly, and hopefully next year I'll be able to. When we do, oh boy, is it going to be a series on the channel. You bet your fucking ass it's going to be. I am truly excited for Alan Wake 2. Before we move on to the best of the year, we have some honorable mentions. These were the games that I played, I liked, but because of some certain reasons or other, just I couldn't put them on any of the lists. I'm sorry. They're fun, but they got some big flaws, and, well, not flaws per se for this first one. Remember how I said that there was a very light tentative 4th spot for the didn't play list? Well, that's because Monster Hunter Wilds doesn't have really any information about itself. We got a trailer at the Game Awards, and that's it. And obviously, I'm going to be excited for the aforementioned sequel to Monster Hunter Worlds. Love that game. It fills that very, very small niche of gaming that is nature documentary in a fantasy world, but you play in it. It's a weird genre. It exists. And Monster Hunter World scratched that very, very particular itch. So Wilds probably going to do the same thing. But there's literally no information but the trailer. So that's why it's in the honorable mentions. Along with, let me go over my list here. Yes, okay. This one, bit of a controversial one. Not because of it being just in honorable mentions, but because apparently it has some really weird development and regional issues, and it's Dark and Darker. I can't remember when I played it, but it was in like an open beta kind of thing, and I was like, oh, a lot of stream people are playing it. It looks kind of good. Let me see what it is. Oh, okay. It's a battle royale, but it's a medieval battle royale in a dungeon, and you're getting loot. Okay, you have my attention, because obviously I love my Souls-likes, and battle royales are kind of the ugly cousin of the Souls-likes. Sure, they get the job done, and a lot of people like them more, but that's just... maybe ugly cousin wasn't the right word for that. Either way, it grabbed my attention, and I played it. And I actually really liked it. Except for the fact that it was really permadeathy. Like, really, really permadeathy. So, how you play is you get a class, you get a set of starting equipment, and they throw you in the dungeon. And you have to survive, get loot, and get out. You might not come across... no, you're going to come across some people. You might survive, you might not, but generally speaking, the plan and what's written on paper is actually pretty sound. You can either fight with people or team up and split the loot. But as we all know with Battle Royale types, 90% of the people are not going to team up with you, okay? And that's normally fine. That's how people play. That's what people like to do. I can get over that. But if you die in the game, everything about the character, not everything, but pretty much all of your equipment is back to zero. Nothing you do matters. You get some experience and you get your character leveled up and you get some minor things here and there, but there is no tentative and tangible progression. It was so annoying where I was actually having fun battling a skeleton and then seeing some people, and I was like, hello there, and immediately just 2 arrows and I'm dead. And then all of the work, all of the loot that I had acquired, yeah, I don't expect to keep it, but it was just not even a chance of it. And I think I definitely know, when I was playing it, I thought to myself, okay, this could work, but there needs to be some kind of change in the character creation stuff. And I brought up Hunt Showdown. Their system of you have a permadeath character, but you don't lose anything, or you have a certain threshold before the character dies. You have a level gap between like up to 30 or something, and until you hit that 30, you don't lose any of the equipment that you have collected and safely escaped with. I think that system in itself should have been implemented in Dark and Darker. That's my opinion. I get people saying, it's a hard game, get good at it. I am probably one of those people that do say, get good at it. Like I said, I play Souls games. You do sometimes have to get better at a game to progress. However, that's with a one-player, single-player, I'm just me kind of game. When you have a group of people that most likely is just going to go murder hobo on your ass, then there is a bit of a difference, and it just kind of, I enjoyed it if it was a single player game and you had a time limit for being in the dungeon and you leveled up and you had your own mini dungeon that you can explore. There was no tutorial. They just threw you into a multiplayer game and you had to figure it out. It was in early access, yes. It could be worked on, yes. Although from what I've heard about not being able to be on Steam or something about region, Chinese, Asian, something, I honestly don't know. After I had played it, I was like, it's fun. I'm probably not going to play it anymore. Just out of my head, out of my mind. I see it every now and then, but otherwise, I mean, I love the concept, but the game is, it's too frustrating for me. And if the game is too frustrating, I just don't want to play it. Simple as that. It's sad, but it's true. Something that's not frustrating, however, is One Piece Unlimited Cruise. It is unlimited? Yes. I always think it's ultimate or unlimited. I think it's adventure that's ultimate. I don't know. So, I did a series on my Twitch, and I migrated some of it over to YouTube early this year. I think it was early this year. Sometime this year. One Piece Ultimate Adventure, or Unlimited... Again, One Piece Adventure, we'll call it that, UA, was one, and still is, one of my favorite Wii games of all time. And I just, over the last few years, have really felt that itch. And with One Piece doing some real big shit this year, I just kind of wanted to play it. So, legally, I do own the game, but I downloaded Dolphin, the Wii, GameCube. It's a really good emulator, apparently. I downloaded that, checked around for some ROMs, and lo and behold, there it was, along with the other games that are in the series. But we'll get to that in a second. So, obviously, I have played Unlimited Adventure before, and I love it. And playing it again was great, although this time in a different mindset of not just being a kid enjoying a game, of being a kid enjoying a game and also reviewing the game. I still love the game. It's got flaws, absolutely, but I still enjoy the game. But, as well, I never got to play the Cruise, Unlimited Cruise. It never got ported over to America, and I always knew it existed, and I always wanted to play it, but I never got a chance to. So, seeing that I was in the One Piece mood, just pick it up and just download the ROM, just to kind of feel it out, see if I enjoyed it. And 2 games later, I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. It would have been, again, one of my childhood favorites. Hell, it's probably one of my favorites now. It is just as good, if not... Actually, no, it is better than the previous adventure game. Unlimited Cruise is a 2-part game. It's very interesting. Very rare in the gaming world, you might say. But it uses those 2 parts well. First half of the game, 1 disc, is just kind of getting you back in the game, getting you reacquainted, joke, with the mechanics, the characters. You play as Brook now. It's not in English. I mean, the subtitles are, but the voice acting is not. Don't care. It's still great. But yeah, if you are a One Piece fan, absolutely check those games out. The Unlimited Cruise games are legitimately really fun. There is so much little details of One Piece nostalgia and really fun game mechanics, especially when you get into the second disc. You have a save data carryover mechanic, as you should with a 2-disc, that takes the levels that you got, because it is an RPG kind of, from the first game, brings it over to the second game, but also gives you new moves. You can customize your own character and how they fight. It opens up so much more possibilities. It's just really good. It is surprisingly really good, and any One Piece fan should absolutely go and check it out. It's on honorable mentions, though, because it is old. And normally I would have put this on my best of this year. However, the deck was so stacked on the best games this year that Cruise had to go into at least the honorable mentions. And oh boy, does it deserve it. Absolutely deserves it. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, or skipped ahead the video to. It doesn't really matter as long as you're watching it. Hi. We have now the best, in my opinion, best games of this year. So here's the criteria. It didn't have to come out this year. It just had to be played this year. So we have... Actually, most of the games that I have on this list came out this year. So, I think one of them didn't, but no, two. Most of the games on this list, I think, came out this year. So, we're kind of... It's fine. It's fine. These games were absolutely my favorites. I had such a long list and had to put it to 6 because 5 was too short and 7 would have made this video go way too long, because I'm going to gush about these games in great lengths, more than I already have about the previous stuff that I've talked about. So let's get into it. I had a hard time putting these all in order. It was very thin margins this year, except for the number 1 spot, but it was very thin margins up to the number 2 spot. And hopefully you all love these recommendations. Go check these games out. They absolutely deserve your attention. Let's get into it. Number 6 this year is a sequel of a sequel, technically, to a game series that I absolutely adore. It is a horror puzzle series in real time? Technically, there's some real-time elements to it. It's a weird kind of game, but it is one of a kind. It is totally worth your time. It is Lakeview Cabin 2. Now, if you are not familiar with the Lakeview Cabin series, let's go down a refresher course. It started as a Ludum Dare game back before Flash stopped being Flash on the internet. Take that as much as you may. It is an amazing point-and-click puzzle game where technically you are the killer, but you are trying to survive on a Lakeview cabin with your family. Okay, you might have already killed your family. Honestly, the lore of this series is deep. But we move on from that to the sequel, which was a fully fledged version of the Dare game that was much more robust, many more endings, and it was amazing. It is always amazing, and you should go check it out in a second, because we'll get to that kind of really interesting tidbit that will... Hold on a second. Then we had the Lakeview Cabin Collection, which was another version of the original remade, but also had a hub overworld movie theater that you went to different movies that were spoofs and genres and homages to other horror movies, and you tried to survive those puzzles. They were and are still amazing. Then there was Lakeview Valley, which is kind of a buggy mess in multiple ways, more than the term that it's usually used in a game, because there are bugs in it. I'm making a pun kind of thing. It is an amazing life sim game where you get away with murder. It's highly, highly enjoyable, and it's weird as fuck. But that kind of was the end for a little bit because it had a kind of rough development. Like I said, it's got some bugs, it's got some jank, but it's so worth checking out. And the developer took their time to make this afterwards. Lakeview Cabin 2. Technically the sequel to Lakeview Cabin, but also the 4th or 5th in the series. It's, honestly, I don't know where it stacks up timeline-wise, but gameplay-wise, it does so much more than its predecessors in such a clever way. Let's get into it. First and foremost, you have your hub, which is a tiny little carnival where kids are exploring and just doing mischief, because that's what you do as kids. You go off in the dark of night and you play in an abandoned carnival that may or may not be haunted by an evil clown. Don't worry about it. Then you have another series in the Lakeview Cabin series where you are a family at a lodge on the Lakeview Cabin, and you can kind of see the park off in the distance. There's another island off in the distance that may or may not be the actual Lakeview Cabin. World building in this series is amazing, and you just have to survive with your family as best you can. Or not. Mysteries. Finding all sorts of secrets, all sorts of weird, good and bad things that you can do in the game, because it's all trial and error until the killer shows up, and then it's all bloody. And it's wonderful. It is so, so wonderful. And that's when the game takes a turn, because instead of kind of sticking with the original mechanics of the game, you have your environment, you have to survive, you have to do as best as you can to kill off the killer. We kind of shift that. You're now in a hotel at a costume party, and you have to find the killer or killers before they kill everyone. Okay, kind of the same, kind of different. I like this. Move on to the next. You're now in a weird what's the show's? Oh my god, I'm forgetting the name of the show. It's so fucking popular. Twilight Zone. Thank you, brain. You're now in a Twilight Zone episode. But you're in multiple Twilight Zone episodes. And then there's also this other weird thing that's going on in the background. There's multiple killers from multiple different zones, but all the zones connect. It is mind-boggling how this one works, kind of. It's really cool. And then you have the 4th game, which is a roguelite, but also the same Mad Maxian themed world. Honestly, the scope and creativity of this one developer, I believe, it is a one developer team that made this game. I couldn't come up with this shit. This is the same but different in such a big way. And the cherry on top, because Flash doesn't exist anymore on the internet, he remade the original Lakeview Cabin and just stuck it in the game with new stuff. How can I not put it on my Games of the Year list? There is so much care and attention and detail to not only the puzzles, the variety of scenarios, and the absolute love for pulp horror. It deserves the number 6 spot so heavily. You should absolutely check it out. Anyone that is a horror fan, anyone that is a puzzle fan, anyone that just likes something different, because there aren't really any kind of puzzle games like this that I know of. If there are, please tell me. But this is so unique of a puzzle game. You can spend hours just in one level exploring, trial and erroring, and then when you finally figure out the one thing that you need to do to survive, it flips itself on its head and you realize, oh, I didn't save anyone. I just doomed everyone. It's amazing. So, Lakeview Cabin 2, absolutely check it out, and that's why it's on the number 6 spot. This year's number 5 spot is not actually a released game. Well, it's released, but not by a company. It's more of a modded experience that I was not expecting to be playing. Normally, I don't do ROM hacks of this caliber, but it was so unique, so fun. It brought me back to my childhood of actually liking Pokemon. Because the last Pokemon game I played was Black and White. From then on, I just never played them. It was fun. I have a weird little my unique way of playing the game of Pokemon and enjoying the world. But after that, it was like, okay, Pokemon exist. I'll keep up tabs and whatnot. And then it went into 3D, and I'm like, oh, I don't really... I want a 3D Pokemon, but not the way they're doing it. Needless to say, my Pokemon love was there, but never really any more fulfilled until those days. Until this game. This is Pokemon Infinite Fusion, I believe, ROM hack game made by some really crazy people. And I gotta say, this revived my love for the Pokemon genre. So, strap in, because this is going to get weird. Almost weirder than Lakeview Cabin 2, but not as, well, you figure it out. So, let's set the stage at least to start with. Pokemon. We all know it, alright? We all love it. It is a adventure battle game where you go around gyms getting badges and fighting stronger and stronger opponents with stronger and stronger Pokemon with a group of your own stronger Pokemon in order to beat the Elite Four and become the champion of the Pokemon world. Tried and true, what they do pretty much every year, and it's a formula that works. However, what if, instead of a new generation of Pokemon, we took the current generations, opened up a blender of DNA, shoved 2 of those Pokemon in, closed the lid, pulsed it a few times, and dumped it out into a weird puddle and see what formed? That is Pokemon Infinite Fusion. Like its name suggests, you can take a Pokemon, a simple Rattata, and you can fuse it with its DNA intact or however genetically mutated you want it to be with another Pokemon. And whether it's a good or bad idea, you put them together and you create something new and exciting. Because that's one of the things I really missed about Pokemon. The new and exciting bit. Yes, new Pokemon come out in every generation, but it's kind of all the same as it's gone on through the years. Yes, current generations are kind of mixing up the formula, and we love it for that, but I want that original Pokemon flair with all of the weird exploration and unknown that the Pokemon world kind of is about. And Pokemon Infinite Fusion does that in spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. It's got a full deck with the Jokers intact. The first run I did was kind of normal. I had non-fused Pokemon, And then as I went through, found other Pokemon to fuse all together, and by the end, I had this hodgepodge team of Pokemon that should not exist. And frankly, some of them wanted to die, but it was my team, and I loved every second of it. And then I played it again, because in normal Pokemon games, you get one save file. I'm from that generation. I only get one save file, alright? But no, not this. I get another save file, and another, and another, and another, and I can just kind of customize the save file. Do you want to start with different generations? Do you want the Pokemon already fused, and you want to unfuse them and fuse them again? Do you just want to start off as your first Pokemon with a legendary? You can do that. There are almost infinite ways to go through the game. No one playthrough of this game is the same. And that is what brought me back to the love. Because once you play a Pokemon game once, at least in my opinion, the experience is kind of done. You know which Pokemon are coming up. You know which ones are your favorites. If I was to play Black and White again, I'd probably get the same team because that's what I went through with and loved. I'm not one of those Pokemon people that catches a Pokemon and switches them out. I catch something, I see, and I stay with 3 Pokemon until I find something else. I could beat 2 gyms with only 3 Pokemon, or whatnot. I am that kind of person. I'm the Ash Ketchum type of person until the Elite Four happens, where all of the Pokemon come in. But Infinite Fusion gave me the chance to have a different experience every time I played that game. And that's something really unique in a Pokemon game. So that's why it gets number 5. Not one of the higher up Pokemon games on... no, not Pokemon games. One of the higher games on this list. But I have to at least bring it up and talk about it because it is such a unique gaming experience. It's free to anyone that downloads. Google it, find it. I don't have the link anymore. I can probably find it. I'm not going to put it in the description. But if you are a Pokemon fan, go check it out, because if you want something a little bit the same but also refreshed, Pokemon Infinite Fusion is it's just heartwarmingly charming in a weird Giger-esque way. On the number 4 spot, we have not 1, not 2, not even 3, a whole goddamn series of games that are so goddamn wonderful. This is the Full of Cats series, and specifically, my favorite of the games so far, A Castle Full of Cats. Now, are any of you familiar with point-and-click hidden object games? They are honestly not a dying breed of game genres, but they are few and far between. I know there has been a bit of a resurgence as of the past few years, but when I was growing up, you had I Spy and Where's Waldo? Where's Wally for our others across the pond. But those kind of books and games, because I Spy had a series of games for the PC back in the day that I absolutely adored. They are burned into my DNA as a gamer. There's just something so charming and so wonderful about a beautiful drawn or photographed scene of just how the hell did they put all this together kind of wonder, and you have to find someone specific or some other accoutrement of a weird item list. You find a key, it's an acorn, it's a sponge, it's the letter 23. Letters 23? The point is, I love hidden object games, and I haven't played enough of them. I want to eventually on the channel play the I Spy games, but there's a weird, I don't know why or where they are. I'm not touching it for a little. Don't worry about it. I have no words, and yet I'm supposed to make words. Either way, I was in a mood for a point-and-click game, and there was this free little 100 Cats game out and about that I was like, you know what, let's just play that. Let's do a little thing like there. Took me like 20 minutes to do, and that was during a stream. I enjoyed it, but I felt myself not feeling fulfilled. So I kind of went along and did okay, what's related to this? And an apartment full of cats popped up. And I thought to myself, oh, I recognize this. I saw this a while ago. I liked the artwork. It's really cheap, under $3. Sure, you know what? I think it was under $3. It's definitely under $5. Let's pick it up. Let's get it. Let's play it. And I just loved every second of it. There is a beautiful charm to the artwork. The whimsical nature of every single apartment in that building. And how well hidden some of those cats were. They also did a beautiful mechanic that is, again, calling back to the I Spy games here, of momentum in your hidden object games. You click something, and it has a reaction somewhere else. It's minor. It's like a hidden cat that moves around every now and then when you find it, but it's there. And that little thing just grabbed me because, again, part of my DNA, part of my gaming love is those kinds of games. I grew up with them, so this game immediately grabbed me. And then I looked into it, and apparently there were more games full of cats. The Castle Full of Cats, aforementioned, and just recently there was a Arcade Full of Cats. I think there's another one. I don't remember off the top of my head. I should have written it down. But there's also going to be more down the line next year, so I'm all aboard on that. But what made this specific game, A Castle Full of Cats, my favorite top pick of this year was because it was a game in a hidden object game that did all of those things that I loved in those 90s I Spy games. It had a world that you could explore. It had locked doors that you had to find a certain number of cats in order to progress. It had characters that wanted things, that if you found them somewhere else in the world, you can interact with them later. There were hidden keys, hidden areas. It was not just a hidden object game, it was a hidden world game. I loved it. It was such a joy, and I needed that joy. You know what? It is such I play a lot of not in your face, but I have a lot of intense games, a lot of thinky games, a lot of keep up the pace kind of games, or you're going to be left behind. Roguelites. And Souls-likes, as you were. Real-time not real-time, but strategy games, turn-based stuff. I game kind of hard in my genres, in my preferred genres, and it was so refreshing, so nice to just sit back and look for some hidden cats in a library with magic. There was just a no care in the world joy that I had playing this game. It was kind of challenging in some places. It was rewarding when I solved a puzzle. And the final boss, yes, there is a final boss in this game, was just the right amount of clever and challenge. It was lovely. It was wonderful. I fully recommend not just the castle, but the whole shebang. the team that are developing these games well and truly know what they're doing, because they make such amazing content. And it's not just a castle. They make, or not just a blank full of games. They have a whole bunch of other types of cat games that are adorable. They've got all sorts of dev cats hidden in the games and main characters. They also take some of the money that they earn from the games and donate it to shelters. And you have to love a company that does that. It's not profit, it's just love for cats. So if you like cats, like me, or you love point and click games, like me, go check out these games. They are so heartwarmingly wonderful. We are at the second half of the list, and this is where things get difficult. I had the toughest decision to make this year out of all the lists I have made up until this point. It was so close between the second and third spot. First spot was very easily taken. Obviously, we know what it is. You're just waiting for me to confirm what it is. But the second and third spot were tooth and nail fighting. And it was one thing that made the decision where these two placed. And oh boy, okay, let's get into it. The third best game of the year for me was Darkest Dungeon 2. Now, I am a huge Darkest Dungeon fan. I wouldn't have beaten the game this year, let alone go back to it, if I didn't love it so much. It is a wonderful permadeath dungeon crawler. It is such a terrific game, and it got even more terrific with the modding scene that I discovered. You horny fucks. But Darkest Dungeon 2 was a big anticipation for me, and it did not disappoint. It was, as the devs said, they wanted to make the game different and not make the first game obsolete, and I can easily say that they have achieved that. They did some things good, and then they did some things bad, however. But let's get into it. The first thing we'll start off with is the good. Hell, the great. It feels the same. You play as a troop, a 4-person group of people that want to save the world from a disaster that kind of obviously you started, but we won't get into spoilers on the end of Darkest Dungeon 1. You are going through areas of pure chaos. You are fighting your way through just to get to the mountain, just to even see what the final boss will be, and it will destroy you, and you have to do it all over again. It is wonderful. I am probably one of the few people that like the carriage mechanics. I got used to the controls of moving side to side. I like the interchanging pathways. I love that you can kit it out with little changes and trinkets and trophies and a pet. The pets are lovely, adorable little creatures in Gremlins. I love the presentation, the change in art style. Holy shit. The art style of this game is amazing. Well and truly above and beyond what I was expecting it to look like. And then there's the combat and the new skills and the changing templates of the characters with the paths, and you get to see backstory, gameplay backstory. I think I was saying it when I was playing it, but I love story through game mechanics. And this rewards you every single time you complete someone's backstory. You get new skills and unlocks, and you get new items. It is such an amazing experience of Darkest Dungeon solidified and then redispersed into a new form. It is challenging, it is enjoyable, and it has one, okay, maybe two, but one little flaw. One little flaw that wasn't, I don't think, intentional, but it happened, and it's really glaring, and it's why I actually haven't played a lot more Darkest Dungeon 2 than I did the first game. So, in Darkest Dungeon 1, you went out into dungeons, and you beat the dungeon, and you went back to the hamlet. Alright? And on harder difficulties, you took longer in the dungeon to complete your task. But once you were done, you went back to the hamlet. You might be seeing where I'm going with this, but you're wrong, because the hamlet is not the problem area of not having a hamlet. We technically have a hamlet, it's the Altar of Hope. That's not where I'm nitpicking here, because this is kind of nitpicking, kind of not. So, in retooling how you progress through the Darkest Dungeon, you are now in a carriage, and you go down a path through different sections of the game. What changed for me, or at least in my perspective, was time it took to beat the game. Now, arguably, and I think factually, this still existed in the first game. You went out on some really long missions to get things, to beat bosses, but the hamlet was always the place you went back to after, I want to say, at least 30 minutes. It was between 10 to 30 minutes, maybe more, depending on the mission you went on. And we're not talking about Crimson Curse or the Meteor Shower or even the final Darkest Dungeon here. Just normal gameplay. You went to a dungeon at max 30 minutes, and then you went back to the hamlet. In Darkest Dungeon 2, you start the run, and you go, and at probably the second level to third and on, time becomes a big factor. You don't beat the game in less than an hour. Hell, there are some runs that take me 2.5 to almost 3 hours to beat. And I don't know how I feel. Okay, I do know how I feel about it. I don't like it. Darkest Dungeon was a one more turn kind of game. You played through a dungeon, you got back to the hamlet, and you wanted to go back into the dungeons. In Darkest Dungeon 2, you keep on the path, and there's no break. There are the inns that you stay in, but it's very quick. You don't upgrade the inn like you do the Altar of Hope. That's an end of progression kind of thing. And as a roguelite, you need, in my opinion, to have quick rounds. And that's where Darkest Dungeon 2 kind of lost me. It's not a quick game, where the first one was. This may not affect some people. It affects me, though. And out of all the wondrous things that I love about Darkest Dungeon 2, the feeling of how long a run takes, pretty much, no, I was going to say almost, it ruins it. It takes so long to complete a run, and when you're in late game, like I am, I've upgraded pretty much everything, candles are useless. You just want to go and beat the boss. And it's hard. It's a very hard game, and it's challenging, and I'm not complaining about that. But at a certain point, you know this is just taking forever. This just feels like it's taking forever. And as I said, it does exist in the previous game. When you have those good runs through different dungeons, when you finally get to a boss and it wipes you. But that feeling didn't exist because you could take your time and you could get out of the game, you could close it for a while, you can come back a day or two later. In this, pausing a run that you have been doing well on or not doing well on, and then coming back to it a day or so later throws you out of it. And then once you're in it, you're like, okay, what was I doing again? What were the abilities? What did I have equipped? Instead of, I'm just going to do another dungeon run. And that's why it made the 3 spot this year. The time management... time management viewing? Perception? The perception of time management. There we go. Just wasn't there like the first one. And that has so much more to do with how they changed the game style up with the carriage and all of that. I love that they changed it. It just has a different feel sometimes to me, and I'm still playing it. I love the new DLC. I think more DLC breaking up the monotony of repetition, because also, again, side tangent that also existed in the first game, there's a lot of repetitivity. You play and fight against the same enemies, the same areas, all the same... Well, no, the bosses are much different, but it's the same areas, same layer bosses, technically, okay, and then the same just areas over and over. And again, in the first game, it was broken up because you can choose different dungeons. You can take your time and figure out where you're going, put the party together. You were paced well. In 2, it's more apparent. The pacing feels off. The enemies still feel like, okay, where do I go? Do I go to this one? Do I go to this one? Especially in certain cases where I know there's one specific layer boss I can reliably beat, and the others are so much harder to do. I haven't even beat the fish guy. That layer boss is still unbeatable to me. And if you're running the dungeon and you keep going, pacing is way off. It just feels off. And I think, again, more stuff. There needs to be more variety. So as more DLC comes in, I could already feel it being better with the Blade stuff, with the Crusader and the Duelist. It absolutely refreshed, and I am playing it more now because there is new stuff, and it feels fresher with some new enemy varieties. It just needs more. It needs more areas. It needs more enemies. But with all of that said, it is still absolutely so good, and it pains me to even say these things, but that's why it had to take the number 3 spot, because it was great, but it had some really big flaws. So, what beat Darkest Dungeon 2 in the number 2 spot? Like I said, it was a sliver of a decision. To be fair, also, I wasn't even sure if this was going to make the list or if it was going to be an honorable mention, because in the number 2 spot, we actually have a remake of a game that a long time ago, I believe, made the number 1 spot. This is Risk of Rain Returns. Now, out of the blue, wasn't expecting it, the Risk of Rain devs said, hey, we're remaking the first game. I love the first game. Like I said, it was on the number 1 spot. I think one of my first best of year game lists sometime early on when we started the channel. 2000, really early, I don't know. Probably in the first couple years. And when they said they were remaking Risk of Rain, they showed screenshots. The art style looked amazing. They said they were going to clean it up, make it a little more updated, I thought, okay, I'm definitely buying it, but is it worth it? Because it's one thing to slap a new coat of paint on something, update the mechanics a little bit, the gameplay, make it a bit more modern, use what they learned from Risk of Rain 2, and kind of, not jury-rig, but adapt those kind of mechanics into the remake. I was excited, but tentative, because I didn't just want a one-to-one remake. And as the development of it was going on, they were saying, okay, no, we are adding some new characters, we are adding some new items. Okay, so it is worth getting, but is it worth the list? Because if it's the same, but just a little bit more added onto it, I don't really see myself putting it on the best of list. I'd put it in honorable mentions, definitely. But it would have to do something really amazing and different to put it on the list. And it's on the top 2 spot. So you know it did something amazing to put it on the list. Providence Trials. So, this was what I was not expecting, and it is so worth the price of admission alone. Let's start with the basics and we'll get into the fun bits. Risk of Rain is a roguelite. I'd call it a shooter, but it's more of a 2D action platformer survival game. You have a character with a set of abilities, and you have to survive waves of enemies while trying to get to the next level and the next level and the next level until you get to the end where you fight Providence, the big boss. It's really fun because, like a roguelite, you are picking up items that give you little buffs, little changes, or big changes to your character in order to make sure you live longer. It is a beautiful formula. It is one of my favorites. And as you play, more things unlock, more things are available to you. It's just a wonderful thing. It's why I like Binding of Isaac so much. But I do remember that the reason I think I liked Risk of Rain better, and also Enter the Gungeon, was because the variety of items wasn't too much. In Isaac, oh boy, there's so much stuff. But half of the fun with the original game of Isaac was you remembering all of the items. There was enough to make it really varied, but there was few enough that you remembered pretty much everything that everything did, and in a split second decision, you would know, okay, I do want that, I don't want that, and in a timed game, that's very important. I love how Binding of Isaac, Rebirth, and Afterbirth, and all of that stuff just exploded. I love it, it still has a place in my heart, but it can be a bit much. That's why Enter the Gungeon, and right now, Risk of Rain, took my roguelite preferences, because it has just enough items to make me remember what everything does, but also just few enough items to make me remember, but enough items to make all the runs varied differently. Words. Risk of Rain also had different characters with different abilities, and you know the shtick from now if you've played Risk of Rain originally. What Returns does is, put a beautiful new coat of paint on it. It is so good. I played when it came out, the original, and I, loved it. And then I jumped straight into the Returns, the remake. And while I do still love the art style of the original, this new art style, it is so crisp, so well detailed. Everything looks, it is beautiful. The environments, the enemies, the characters, the abilities and items, they all look amazing. Fresh coat of paint does so much to liven up the game. But that's surface stuff, along with a couple new characters, a couple new items. Well, a couple. There's actually quite a few items that were added, but not too much to be, again, too much. There's just enough. And then the characters were so different, so varied, you gotta love it. They also, under the hood, changed up and softened some of the edges. Risk of Rain is a hard game. I forgot how hard of a game it was. But jumping into Risk of Rain 2, they softened some stuff. They did the old school rules for the original, for people that liked tried and true. They did modern rules for how you survive, what the requirements to move on through the portal, all of the other stuff. And then they had custom stuff, and even a Risk of Rain 2 rule set. Honestly, if you are a Risk of Rain fan, that alone is great, because you can jump into it knowing how difficult you want it to be, or if you are not a Risk of Rain fan or just trying out for the first time, lower the difficulty as much as you want. Change those little details. Make it as challenging but fair as you want it to. That's one thing the first game didn't have. It was... I couldn't see casual people playing this game and enjoying it. It was hard. And that's on easy mode. If you get into normal and monsoon levels, you are just not completing the game. But in the remake, I can actually feasibly say I might be able to beat Providence in monsoon difficulty. That's kind of amazing. But then there's more, because the aforementioned Providence trials that I was not expecting, but I absolutely love. They are mini challenge levels for different characters to unlock new items and new abilities. They took what they learned, like I said, from 2, where you can actually unlock different versions of different abilities from each character and kind of mix and match, and they brought that over to the remake. So now you don't just have an enforcer with the shield bash, you have an enforcer with a shield bash or a charge or some kind of really cool not grenade launcher, but something along the line. You can basically customize each character to the way you want to play, or play a certain way in order to get a certain item unlock. It's wonderful. And then the puzzles. Each of those challenges is varied, is challenging. There are wave-based enemies, there are races, there are puzzles, there are creative uses of game mechanics that not only open your eyes to the possibility of even being used, but also you can take that into the actual game and use to survive, along with unlocking all sorts of other things. Them alone would have been an amazing game. Just Providence Trials, bundle it in this lovely little DLC package and just ship it off into one of the Risk of Rain games. But no, it is base level with the game. I love each and every Providence trial that I have done. Win or lose, they are spectacular little breaks of the grind of going through the levels normally. I did not know I wanted them, and now I can't see a Risk of Rain game without them. I want to see them in Risk of Rain 2. I want to see maybe more Providence Trials show up. Maybe even when they do a Risk of Rain 3, I want them to be there. I don't know what that would be, but kind of imagine or something. It is so good. And to top it all off is also the reason why it beat Darkest Dungeon 2. Darkest Dungeon 2, like I said, had a few flaws, but because this was such a well done remake that added something so unexpected, it has, in my opinion, no flaws. It's not perfect, but it's practically perfect. And that's why it beat out Darkest Dungeon 2. Just that sliver of perfection and unexpected joy. That's why Risk of Rain 2 got the number 2 spot. I mean, Risk of Rain Returns. Oops. I'm just going to put that in. I'm not redoing that entire spiel. We're here. It's time. Drum roll, please. We have the top spot of the list this year. The number 1 game of the year, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions. It is none other than Baldur's Gate 3. Oh, where do I begin? Well, let's begin with Larian Studios and the congratulations of actually being rewarded for their hard work. I have been a fan of them for years. Divinity, Original Sin 1 and 2 are truly amazing games. I am so glad that the third crack at it, best of 3, third time's the charm, all of those sayings, that they got the recognition and the deserved praise of something. I honestly believe now, if people that played Baldur's Gate 3 go back to one of the Divinity games, I'm going to say 2. Go back to 2, because it's the closest to Baldur's Gate 3. It's actually surprisingly closest, but we'll get into some speculation and stuff in a sec. But I truly think that if you enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 and haven't played them before, go check out Divinity Original Sin 2. It is just as good as this. Baldur's Gate's better, but it is so up there. So, let's get into it. Why is Baldur's Gate 3 so good? In my opinion, it's the sex. I'm not kidding, but let's be a little bit more specific here. Okay? Because all in all, the game itself I was expecting to be terrific. I've been saying since Divinity 2 and since the early access development of Baldur's Gate that this was going to be a terrific game because I know Larian Studios can pull it off. I wasn't expecting this level of pulling it off that I was expecting. I thought we were going to get essentially Divinity Original Sin 3. And we did and didn't get that at the same time, because I got what I was expecting, a beautiful, well put together turn-based strategy RPG, CRPG, there's a difference, of just beautiful D&D nature. That's what I was expecting. The level of, I want to say polish, detail, commitment, love, and care that was put into this was so much more than I was hoping and expecting for. It's almost a speechless quality, or speechless level of quality that was put into Baldur's Gate 3. Yes, there's still some jank, but that happens. Hell, Divinity, the 1-2 Divinity has some pretty good jank in it too. So I'm giving it a pass for a couple reasons. The good outweighs the bad in so much. So let's get into it. Yes, the sex. Why is it that makes this game so much better than the original? Well, let's start in with who you're having sex with, the characters. First off, like I said with Divinity 2, I think the reason why I say go back to Divinity 2 if you like Baldur's Gate 3 is because it has those characters. It has the flawed, damaged, yet fun characters that you can romance and relationship them up in that game. But budget. There are such good cutscenes, such good voice acting, such good writing. Just the emotional attachment to all of the characters that you have as companions really puts it heads and tails above everything else. It fills in that Mass Effect almost BioWare-y slash what are other games? Because you got the Mass Effect, you've got your Dragon Age, there it is, that's the other one. You have your Dragon Age character just companions, okay? And that in itself, I think, what grabbed people's attention. It wasn't the fact that it was a great RPG, it wasn't the fact it was D&D, it was because the companions were romanceable and fuckable. And that sounds like a slight on the game, because it sounds like, oh, the only reason Baldur's Gate 3 is popular is because you can romance and have intimate relationships with Shadowheart and Karlach and Will, but it's not. It's actually the reverse, because that's what brought people through the door. People love that kind of stuff. Everyone wants their waifu or husbando or whatever you want to call them. They want that character that they can have a connection with, be it emotional or intimate. But Larian did such a great job with the entire game that people showed up for the characters and stayed for the gameplay. And that's amazing to me. And again, it's exactly the same what 2 did, but on a budget. So again, go play Divinity Original Sin 2. I have a series on the channel if you want to take a look, but we're talking about Baldur's Gate 3. And let's get back into it with the gameplay itself. It is an evolved version of the original Divinity stuff. In 1, we had the environmental hazards, where if there was a puddle of water, you can electrocute it. If there was a oil spill, you can set it on fire. There's all that beautiful stuff. That's then moved into 2, where it has pretty much more combat sense. It has more possibilities of character levels. It is more refined, but also better, which then was taken into 3, and you can now jump. Now, you wouldn't think that's a big thing, but it's huge, because terrain traversal is so important in this. It makes you feel like you're in the world. Hey, I see something down there. Oh, it's a shame I can't get to it. No, you can. You just climb down the ledge that isn't marked or anything. Yes, there are ladder handhold climbing surfaces, but like, this is short enough where your character can climb up or climb down. It's like, oh, now I'm here. I'm interacting with the world. I can jump this chasm instead of levitate and throw people. I mean, you can still do that, but it's old school Divinity, but you can still technically do that. It felt like a world, like an environment you were in. And then you got into combat, which, yes, jumping actually matters, getting you over obstacles, getting you over and closer to enemies, going around certain hazards. And, I mean, D&D combat is one thing, but it just feels so good, especially when you make a character build work perfectly. I didn't, if my playthrough has anything to say about it, but I still enjoyed the hell out of it. And then we have, well, the Let's Play that I did, the story that I experienced. This, I think, is what gamers have wanted for such a long time. A story and story choices that actually pay off in such a grand scale. I want to see the massive spider web of decision trees that this game was. The littlest thing you did in Act 1 rippled to Act 3. Decisions that you make, being good or bad or neutral, change the game so drastically that some characters died. Some characters were never seen again. Sorry, Gale. But just the amount of content that you can just miss in a games industry where they want you to see everything and sometimes force it on you. It is a breath of fresh air to just have your own experience, have your own story be told in such a distinct way and so surprisingly thought out. My playthrough, or my first playthrough, is different than your playthrough, is different than another person's playthrough. Even your second or third playthrough, you're not going to see everything. And that's the point. You are exploring your way, your world, your character. You might know what some things are going to happen in other playthroughs, but generally, it's all going to be new. Just a new feeling, a new exploration, a new character, new relationship choices, both good or bad. It is a triumph of a game in storytelling, character development, gameplay. It's going to be a game of the year. Or not just the year. It's going to be years. People are going to reference this so much. Next year, people are still going to be playing it, and probably the year after that, and the year after that, because, I mean, there's just so much to the game, there's so much to love, and Larian Studios, I know from experience, are not going to stop. They are not going to stop to a scary level of detail, okay? I don't know if, but they're probably going to do an enhanced edition, and it's going to be free to whoever owns the game. They're going to update images, tweak settings, add mod support, DLCs, maybe. I don't actually know what kind of DLCs will be added, because since this is such a well thought out, intertwined game, adding new classes, new characters, not new characters, but new races, because the current set of stuff already is so well implemented, I'm curious to see what kind of new stuff they're going to add. I'm very excited to see it, but I'm not sure what they will add. I know they're going to add stuff. I mean, they already added stuff by the time I was almost done with my playthrough. They added an entire epilogue event that wrapped up your entire story in some fun and memey and in-jokey ways with all the characters. It was, and it is, such an amazing game. And, of course, it had to take the number one spot this year. For me and so many other people, it is the best game of the year of 2023. And that's it. That is the end of 2023, or at least the soon-to-be end of 2023, and the best games of that year. Let's review one more time, shall we, as we usually do. For the didn't play list, we had Remnant 2, the same but better and bigger. Can't wait to check it out. On the number 2 spot, we have Lords of the Fallen, a very interesting concept of a Souls-like game that piqued my interest more than maybe the competition or other competitions of the same genre. And number 1, we have Alan Wake 2. I want to know where that musical number fits in. Why is there a musical number? I don't know. In the best of, we have number 6 of Lakeview Cabin. Such a well-crafted, unique game that if you haven't checked it out, you absolutely should. Number 5 is Pokemon Infinite Fusion. Anything that gives me joy this year was a treasure, and Infinite Fusion actually gave me Pokemon joy again since I was a kid. That is something special. Number 4, A Castle Full of Cats and the Full of Cats series. If you are at all a cat fan, check these games out. And if you want a really charming point-and-click game, again, check the series out. Number 3, Darkest Dungeon 2. You have not seen the end of Darkest Dungeon 2 content on this channel. More stuff will come out. I am going to beat that game, but its flaws kind of supersede its rating, and that's why it got number 3. Number 2, Risk of Rain returns. It is the same game, looking better, feeling better, and just amazingly new content that I was not expecting. And that is terrific. I love that game, and I'm going to be playing more of that game immensely. And finally, we have Baldur's Gate 3. I've gushed about it enough, but my god, I enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 so much. And probably a lot of you have as well. And I mean, it's number 1 this year for a reason. Thank you so much to whoever stuck around to watch this list. I know that the usual camera lighting setup is pretty much the same since I started, but I mean it's what's works, and it's kind of charming in my eyes. But honestly, if you put me on in the background and just listen to my list, I can totally understand that too. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you all stick around for another year, and we'll see what else comes in the 2024 playlist. Maybe it's some of the things that I mentioned previously, or it is something new. I am excited. It was a terrific game, a terrific year for gaming, and I hope that carries over to the next year. So, fingers crossed, I play some really good games, and I'll see you next year.